Hi, folks. I'm Sergio Moya, lead software engineer in Postman. I'm also a member of the technical steering committee on AsyncAPI. So I work full-time basically on the AsyncAPI project. And today we are going to speak about version 3, which is going to be released pretty soon. This is the agenda. We are going to speak about some key facts about the version 3 release. We are going to present all the new features and improvement that brings up. We are going to talk about also the parser API, which is the API that the new parser implements, and how this will help version 3 and major versions in the future. Then we will revisit the takeaways, and why not speak about AsyncAPI v4. Let's start with the key facts. This new version born from a development experience improvement suggestion that Fran made. Fran, it was the director of this project, now it's Lucas. Version 3 took more than 1 year of work, more than 50 contributors. When I say contributor, it's not only you contributing the code, but also commenting on issues, creating issues, discussions, etc. It includes mostly breaking changes. This was made during several, this was like presented on several meetings. In fact, we created a recurrent meeting, I think it's big weekly meeting, where we discuss all the topics of the previous weeks of development, and everyone was invited to. And it's gonna be released in June, as I said, it's gonna be released pretty soon, right? Here I put the link to the issue where all the work has been tracked. I'm going to say something. So the code snippets that you will find here in my presentation can be a little bit different from the final product, let's say, of AsyncAPI version 3, because basically at this very moment, this is still under development. Okay, so what this new version brings up. The very first thing I would like to mention is that AsyncAPI version 3, it's becoming application-centric. And what does it mean, right? AsyncAPI version 2, it was client-centric, even though it wasn't mentioned on any place on the spec. But you can see that operations, AsyncAPI operations, need to be executed by the client or the final user of the API, right? Publish operations means publish a message, and the application that is who's describing the file, and the application will receive it. On the other hand, subscribe means subscribe to a message, and the application will eventually send it. As you can see, everything is defined from the point of view of the final user or the final client. Here I'm showing some example, right, of a subscribe operation. Here, the client should subscribe to this channel, to the user sign up channel, if it wants to receive the user sign up message. This is how version 2 works today. That caused like tons of confusion, tons of issues, questions in Slack, for example, people asking, what should they use? Publish, subscribe? What's the meaning of each of those operation types? As I mentioned, AsyncAPI wasn't very clear about this, about the fact that AsyncAPI file was mainly written having in mind the final user's perspective. And here I wanted to put Greg Meldrum lyrics, because Greg Meldrum composed what it called AsyncAPI anthem. And it's very funny because it mentions this issue in the lyrics. So I invite you to check this on YouTube. So what version 3 introduces, or what it changes? This is application-centric right now. starting from version 3, operations are executed by the application that describes the async API file. We had an issue with publish, subscribe. Okay, we recognize it. So what do we do right now? So let's remove the terms. After a long time trying to think how to fix it, we decided to remove those because it didn't make sense. If we were gonna be moving to an application-centric, didn't make sense to keep it. And instead of publish and subscribe, we introduced what is called now send and receive. Does it make sense? Yes, since it's the application the one that sends messages or rather receives messages. That means publish is now receive and subscribe is now send, right? Basically, what you have to have in mind that, as I mentioned previously, an AsyncAPI file now is written having in mind the application and not the user or the client anymore. So let's gonna see an example here. If previously, let me go back a bit, we had the subscribe operation type. Right now, what we have here is an operation with type send. Despite the fact that you will see here some changes on the objects. This is, for example, channels don't have operations, so operations haven't been defined in the root of the document. That's something we will talk later because those are another changes that we introduces in version 3. But you have to check this. The action now is called send because the application sends a user sign up message to the user sign up channel. I wrote this small, nice cheat sheet so you can put it on your mind, but I'm more than sure that this change, as I said previously, it's a great improvement on the X. It's gonna move to another improvement or another feature that version 3 introduces. Request reply pattern. The request reply pattern is a message pattern that allows the sender to basically get a response from a sent message. So you send a message to the broker, for example, and you expect a response somewhere in another topic. For example, if we talk about Kafka, let's say, a response from the related to the action or the message that you send. In this case, I wrote this small chart or diagram with having a payment service as example that sends a message saying payment exec or to this topic, payment execution, to execute the payment. And the response is expected to be in another topic called payment process with my client ID. So I'm able to read it, right? And in that response could be, I don't know, the payment was successful, for example. In request reply pattern, at least in AsyncAPI, there are two strategies. Reply is to go to a predefined channel, a channel that you know, that is specified in the AsyncAPI file, or rather, you can specify it in the message. For example, you can say, get the topic or get the channel where the response should go from the message header. So in that way, the sender can set where the response should go. Let's move on with the first example with the predefined channel. Here we see that there is a new field on the operation called reply, where you can add the channel where this response, this reply will go. In that case, is the payment process channel. That's it. It means that whenever the sender sends a message to a channel, to the channel of the operation, the reply will go to that channel, which basically has an address that is described in the AsyncAPI definition file. In that case, it's payment done. Cool. What happens if you want to have it more dynamically? So you want to allow the sender to specify to which channel should go. You can specify that as well by adding an address field, as you can see here, with a new location that basically it's a runtime expression. So you can use message headers, for example, or even payload to say, please get the topic or get the channel from, in this case, the header called reply to. So whenever the broker receives that, it should interpret that this reply, the reply should go to wherever this header value is. As you can see, there is no address here in the channel. Why? Obviously, because it's declared on the message header. What else? We have added more reusability and extensibility features. AsyncAPI, it's allowed to become now a menu of objects. What is a menu of objects? Sorry, it's an organization-wide file or a common file that includes basically components that you can reuse. How we did that in version 3, basically channels now are no longer required. Operations are no longer inside the channels, but in the root document. So in the same level as channels were. And both are not required, and also both can be located under components, meaning you can have a file like the one on the right side of this slide that declares only components that you can reuse as in other definition files, and other AsyncAPI files. Another improvement that we added here in version 3 is that schemas with different formats, Avro, RAML, whatever, are also allowed to be in the component section. Because version 2 didn't support that, because you couldn't define the schema format field on the schema object, but rather you define it on the message side. Let's see what I'm saying. So as you can see here in the example, there is a message and a schema, sorry, called user signup, which is written in Avro. But that's not possible in version 2. That code is not working, right? This specification file will not work on, I don't know, in Studio. It's not a valid one because it's only possible to declare schemas under components if they are AsyncAPI schemas, not Avro, not RAML, etc. Since schema format basically it's defined at that message level, you cannot say this schema it's an Avro. And that's what version 3 redefines. Version 3 redefines the schema object and moves schema format from the message to the schema object itself. That means that whenever you declare now on schema, you can also put the schema format in the same object. In the example we see, the previous example, but now we have this new field under the schema user signup called schema format. Now, whenever you want to use it, you can use it because you are defining the format on the same schema object. What else? Another thing that version 3 introduces as a change is a small but very powerful change, improvement, on the way we merge traits. Remember that traits just are objects that contain some data and can be merged along other objects. In AsyncAPI, at this moment, there is operation traits, message traits, and the merge is being done using JSON merge patch, which is an algorithm that you can find the RFC out there on internet. Here I have an example of how currently in version 2 the merge works. We see here use AsyncAPI operation, where we are applying some traits. The traits here describe the description and the summary. But as we can see, the target operation already have the description, right? So whenever we apply this, everything is overwritten, including the description itself. And that's exactly what version 3 it's changing. Version 3, what it does is that whenever a field is found on the target object and the trait has the same one, like we have a conflict, there is no, the merge mechanism won't override this field. And instead we'll leave the one defined in the main or the target object. We see here that the description still remains. The original description still remains, and it's not overwritten by the trait, but the summary, it's added. That's the small change, but this is very powerful because there was no way of preserving the fields that were written on the original, in that case, operation. Now, version 3, it's possible to do that. Another improvement, it's there are some changes on the metadata fields on some objects. Those were introduced basically for consistency purposes because other objects have it. Those are the ones you see in the screen: the title, the summary, external docs fields on the server object, title and summary fields in the channel object, title field in operation, and operation trait object. Nothing to say here. You have this example. You can see that now everything makes more sense, right? We can define both title, summary, descriptions in all the primary objects on the AsyncAPI file. Okay. Those were basically the features introduced by version 3. As you can see, there are like a bunch of them, very important. But there is also another thing that we created and we introduced because of version 3. And this is the parser API. The parser API basically is the API that the parser GS uses. The parser GS is the main parser, official parser AsyncAPI has. This API basically was introduced taking the opportunity that the parser version 2, the new parser that we had to write for version 3, sorry about the numbers, we decided to do a completely rewrite. This new version of the parser is written in TypeScript. It uses Spectral for validation. The rules are exactly now on our repositories, on the repository of the parser. Well, there is a mix between our repository and Spotlight Spectral one. And also this new, as I said previously, this new parser implements this new parser API. What is this about? What is this parser API about? It's nothing fancy. It's nothing rocket science. It's just an interface that we wrote down in a markdown file with the aim of this should be implemented by all the parsers, no matter the language, etc. So it will be implemented by the parser JavaScript because it's our main implementation, but it will also be implemented by the Golang one, and we will encourage other parsers like the Java one or the PHP, whatever, to implement this interface. This interface is completely detached from the file structure. So whenever you do a big change on the structure of the AsyncAPI file, like we did with version 3, right? Remember, we changed how operations look like. Now operations are not inside channels. So everything of this is like breaking change, right? But this one is not based on the file structure. So it's based on some kind of models that make sense across versions, meaning it reduces breaking changes in major releases and lower the learning curve for people that it's new into this topic, right? Or unfamiliar with the specification. You don't have to know the specification for handling things with the parser. I dropped there, well, this is how it looks more or less. Well, just one part of it. And I dropped there a link to a blog post I wrote like a long time ago about how we decided to do that, why, and how we make it possible. An example of how it looks right now, some operation on the current parser, and how it will look with the new parser that implements this API. We can see here, let's say, one thing I forgot, and sorry, but this is that this API, it's based on intents. I said it's detached from the file structure, but it's also based on intents. What is an intent? Basically, what the user wants to do. It doesn't matter, as I said, if it's get me the channels, and I don't care where in the file it's. So the intent of the user is getting the channels. And that's what, this is the mindset of this new API. And I'm gonna try to demonstrate that with the example. Let's say I want to fetch all the messages from the receive type operation. In parsing version 1, you will have to do tons of things. This is just one way. You can do it with flat map, you can do it with map, whatever. I'm not an expert on JavaScript, believe me. But what I did here is, okay, let's filter the channels by those that have publish operations. And then on every of those channels, get the message from the publish operation. You have, as you can see, you have to know a lot about the specification. I don't think someone new into this will know how to do that without checking several times the documentation. I'm probably asking about the publish subscribe confusion as well. On the other hand, you can see the parser version 2 that implements this new API. It's very simple. Just give me the message filtered by send. That's it, period. Okay, so what are the takeaways of version 3? I would say it improves a lot developer experience. It is application-centric. We introduces these new terms, or we remove the previous publish and subscribe term by something that makes more sense, send and receive. We added, we fixed some consistency issues. We are also supporting new message patterns such as request reply. And from my point of view, it boosts like a lot extensibility and reuse. We saw AsyncAPI can be a menu of objects. The merge strategy for trades make it like able to edit or to avoid overwritten operation or message whenever we apply a trade. We saw some new components as well, like channel, operations, schemas with format. There is also a few more, like several variables, external docs, as I put there. Yeah, from my point of view, this is like the the version, the one that we all wanted to have as soon as possible. And what about AsyncAPI before? Because you might wonder why I put that in a presentation that we are mainly discussing about version 3, the one that is not still released. There is nothing on the horizon. That's the reality, at least yet. So what I would say is, please help us to create this new version 4. How? Please access these both links that I dropped here, the dashboard of the community where you have access to contribution guidelines. You have access to the hot topics that is being that has been developing right now, and also to check how to do contribute to documentation, which is also pretty important in our project. And it's all about the people, and that includes you. You can see how many people contributed to version 3, and I'm forgetting someone for sure. I tried to get all of those here because it's not a matter of only contributing in code. It's documentation, issues, suggesting new features, bugs, etc. So, final takeaway for me: move slow and spec things. Thank you.